Welcome back. Chris Smith filling in for Peter Credlin tonight. She'll be back on Monday too, by the way. I want to return to this chaotic scene in Russia and the critical situation which has developed since Vladimir Putin made his no bluffing nuclear threats. At the UN overnight, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stormed out of a meeting of Security Council after the UK's Foreign Secretary condemned the Russians.
He has left the chamber. I'm not surprised. I don't think Mr. Lavrov wants to hear the collective condemnation of this council.
And then in Russia, while citizens are escalating their revolt against Putin's regime or escaping the country to avoid conscription, the Kremlin has secretly passed new laws to conscript a further 1 million men to fight in Ukraine. But what about Ukraine itself? If you ask most military strategists, Ukraine is winning this war, and Putin's references about activating the nuclear button is a clear sign of desperation. Joining me now to discuss all of this and Ukraine's valiant defence is Halyna Yanchenko, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament. Halyna, welcome. Thank you for your time. 1 million more troops and his hand on the nuclear button. What are Ukrainians making of Putin's desperate moves?
Well, for us, the situation is more or less the same for the 7 months. We are fighting back, and Ukrainian society feels themselves as united as we have never been. So we will keep fighting, but it's really important to understand this is something that we've been screaming for the past 7 months, that there is only one way to actually defeat Russia and to kick them off Ukraine and to stop all this bloody war. And only recipe is to supply enough of heavy weapon to Ukraine. This is the and only way. We see that no attempts to save Putin's face or to avoid escalation. It's impossible because it's Putin who is escalating the war and escalating the situation.
Yeah,
that is why for the civilized world, there is only one way out of this war, is to supply Ukraine with a bigger number of heavy weapon and to help us to protect our cities, to protect our land, and to kick off the enemy from our country.
On that subject, there was some controversy in Australia today about how slow we've been, the government that is, sending our bushmasters over to Ukraine. Is that what is frustrating you, not necessarily primarily about bushmasters, but about the promises that leaders make, Western leaders make, and the delay between the promise and the delivery?
To tell the truth, in my opinion, it is time for our allies and for the civilized countries which feel themselves as leader of free world or civilized world to actually change something in their military production. We see that war continues. Putin supplies huge number of Russian tanks, including outdated tanks, but it's like a very big number of weapons that he's sending to Ukraine. That is why it's very important to actually speed up military production in Western countries. I've been talking about that with German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with our American friends, and it's very important message that I want to send to Australia as well. It's important to actually speed up and increase the number of ammunition as well as weapons that you can produce and then supply to actually help Ukraine to save civilians from these atrocities that Russians are doing here, and to finally stop war, which we all want and we all desire for.
I want to tap into your knowledge of the Kremlin. Are these threats from Putin in the last 48 hours likely to see Kremlin insiders obey his orders or take him out?
One thing that we've learned about Russia, never believe Russians and never believe Putin's. That is why we actually consider that negotiations that we wanted and that we started led to nowhere, because they just don't, they say one things, but then they do totally different things. For example, just a week before full-scale invasion to Ukraine, Putin was giving press conferences, saying that there is no intention in Russia to invade Ukraine. And then they did it. So actually, my big advice, and this is something that we've learned, is it makes no sense to believe Putin, because he will do not what he promises, he will do not what he says, he will do what he can. If Western allies will let him use nuclear weapon, he will do that. If there will be clear messages sent from the world leaders that there will be reaction, then in my opinion, he will not risk to do that. But one more thing, it's important that Western leaders also not only promise, but they do something. And that's why, once again, humanitarian and military assistance is vital here, and the amount of this assistance should be increased.
Yep, stop promising, start delivering. Halyna Yanchenko, thank you so much for your time. Be safe.
Thank you.